Thousands of farmers were standing at the edge of collapse. Debt was rising fast. Crops were failing more often. Many families were quietly preparing to give up farming completely. Some were already talking about selling their land. Then something unexpected happened. One single decision changed everything. And a few years later, those same farmers were no longer in crisis. Their farms were stable again. Their incomes had improved. Entire communities that once feared ruin were now rebuilding with confidence. But at the time, none of this seemed possible. To understand how this happened, we have to go back to the beginning, back to a time when farming in the region was becoming harder every year. The land was still being worked, but something was slowly breaking. Fertilizer costs were rising, fuel prices were increasing, weather patterns were becoming unpredictable. Rain came late or not at all. Crop diseases spread faster than before, and while costs were rising, the price of crops in the market kept falling. Farmers were working harder than ever, but earning less with every season. At first, the problems looked small. A slightly lower harvest here, a delayed payment there, a small loan taken just to survive the next planting season. But over time, small problems stacked up. One season turned into another, and then another. Families who had farmed for generations started to fall into debt. Many believed the next season would fix things, but it did not. Instead, the pressure grew stronger. Farming slowly became a cycle of loss. Work more, earn less, borrow more, lose more. Many experts looked at the situation and saw no clear solution. Reports were written, programs were announced, new farming methods were introduced, but nothing seemed to stop the decline. Because most people were looking at the symptoms, not the system. That is where this story begins to shift. Because one man started noticing something different. He was not powerful. He was not famous. He did not arrive with money or authority. He simply started asking a different kind of question. Why were farmers producing more food than ever, but becoming poorer every year? As he looked deeper, a pattern started to appear. Farmers were not failing because they lacked skill. Most of them were experienced and hardworking. The real issue was hidden in the structure around them. Farmers were acting alone. They bought supplies individually, sold crops individually, and negotiated individually. Each farmer was isolated, even though they were all facing the same challenges. That isolation meant they had no power when dealing with rising costs and falling prices. The system was slowly pushing them into weakness without them realizing it. At first, his idea sounded too simple. He suggested something unusual. Farmers should stop acting alone. They should work together, not occasionally, but continuously, as a group, as a network. At first, the idea was rejected. Many farmers had never trusted collective systems before. Some believed cooperation would not work. Others feared losing control over their own farms. For many, independence was part of their identity, so the idea faced resistance. But he did not force it. He simply kept visiting farms, talking to people, and explaining the same idea in simple terms. Slowly, a few farmers agreed to try. Not many, just a small group. Enough to test the idea, and what happened next began to change everything. The first improvements were small. Farmers who bought supplies together paid less. Those who shared equipment reduced waste. Storage became more efficient. Nothing dramatic happened at first, but the direction was clear. Costs were going down. Small savings started appearing. And in farming, even small changes matter over time. As results spread, more farmers became curious. Then more joined. The network began to grow. But with growth came resistance. Some powerful middlemen and existing market structures were not comfortable with the change. For years, they had controlled how crops were priced and sold. Now farmers were negotiating together, and that balance was shifting. Criticism increased. Doubts returned. Some farmers even considered leaving the system. At that moment, everything was still fragile. The entire idea could have collapsed. Then came a drought. Rain failed across the region. Fields began to dry. Crops started to struggle. This was the moment many believed the system would break. Critics said cooperation would not survive real crisis. But something different happened. Farmers inside the network began sharing resources quickly. Water-saving techniques were spread. Emergency support systems activated. Knowledge moved from farm to farm in real time. No one solved the drought, but the damage was reduced. And compared to outside farms, the difference was clear. Outside farms suffered heavily. Inside the system, farms survived. After the drought, everything changed. People stopped asking if the system worked. They started asking how to join it. The network expanded rapidly. What began as a small experiment turned into a large agricultural system. More farmers joined every month than every week. Training programs were introduced. Better farming techniques were shared. Storage systems improved. Transportation became more efficient. And slowly, incomes began to stabilize. The most important change, however, was not technical. It was psychological. Farmers were no longer alone. They had support. They had information. They had coordination. This changed how they made decisions. Risks became smaller. Mistakes became less costly. And planning became more reliable. Over time, thousands of farmers who were once close to bankruptcy began to recover. Debts were paid off. Farms were saved. Families stayed together on their land instead of leaving it behind. In the end, more than 5 Siluk farmers avoided bankruptcy. But the real story was not the number. It was the decision that started it all. The decision to stop farming in isolation and start working together. That simple idea changed everything. Because isolation creates weakness, but coordination creates strength. And sometimes the biggest transformations do not come from technology or money. They come from a single decision that changes how people see each other. And in this case, that one decision saved thousands of farmers from ruin.